Hey, yo, everyone, gather round. It's story time. Brought to you by the University of Alaska Fairbanks, Department of Social Work, and the Conscious Party Productions. You are listening to The Critical Social Worker, a revolutionary storytelling podcast.
A conscious party.
Revolutionizing our minds.
Elevating our consciousness.
Changing our worlds.
Your story.
My story.
Our story.
All right, so welcome to The Critical Social Worker, a revolutionary storytelling podcast. I think we're on episode number 54, and we're back with Zenia. Zenia, do you remember what your first episode was? What number that was? 20-something?
No, 18, I think. Maybe 18 or 19.
That means we've been busy to get to 54 because I talked to you just almost exactly 1 year ago, right?
Yep.
So cool. All right. So one of the things that we were talking about yesterday when we chatted for a bit was just that 1 year is a long time. It seems as we get older, right? It cruises by. You know, when you're a kid, a year seems to last forever. One school semester, whatever, it lasts forever. But as you get into an adult with kids, you know, things start to cruise. But I am nowhere near the same person that I was 1 year ago. What about you?
Not a chance.
Yeah, I'm completely different, and I believe that if that's not the case, then we're doing something wrong, because we should always be changing and trying to improve our life. And you know, we can in human behavior in the social environment, right? We learn about the lifespan and our trajectories.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think a lot of folks never considered that you have, just by the way you think about things and look at yourself, you can alter your trajectory. Do you believe that?
I do.
Yeah. Well, you were just talking about, kind of trying a little experiment. Is your birthday yesterday?
It was my birthday on the 12th, 2 days ago. Yeah.
2 days ago. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy Earth Strong. Happy that you made it this far, and I hope that this coming year is your best one yet.
Thank you.
Tell us about the
My
experiment.
birthday experiment. So I turned 45, and I'm saying that out loud because it doesn't feel old. It doesn't, but it weirds me out because my brain really does still say 25.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really impromptu. I decided to do this experiment the morning of my birthday at office, and I was just sitting there and I went, so I've been doing a lot of self-reflecting, and I meshed select group of people individually, and I added to it throughout the day, and I asked them, I just did this. Hold on. Let me read it out loud. I said, today is my birthday eve. Oh, so I started it actually the night before my birthday. And as I transition to this new year, I'm continuing to do some exploring to help better understand myself. And I'm asking you to share 3 words that you think of when you think of me. No explanation required. 3 words. Thank you. I appreciate you. And that was scary.
How many people did you send that to?
I actually don't know yet. I haven't kind of gone back because it is more things, probably about 15 or 20 people around that. And I kind of started with basically the people that I talk to most. So they're friends, right? They're friends or their family, because they were just on my list. And then as the couple days went by, and I was thinking about there's some people that I wanted to pick because I knew they were going to give me not just a fluffy answer of, oh, you're great and outdoorsy. I wanted what was the first 3 things? What was the first 3 words that you came? But I think the most interesting, they're all interesting. Let me pause for a sec. Can I tell you why I did it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Coming into my birthday, coming into autumn, coming into the new school year, it really is a new year for me. I've always felt September was that time. As we grow, it can be really painful. And it's been really painful. It's been amazing, but it's been painful. And when I get attached to pain and sucked into pain, I don't see things clearly. And I started to question a lot about who I was and what I was doing, and if what I was saying and how I really wanted to live my life was actually what was coming out, because I didn't feel congruent within myself and things felt yucky. So I was really scared actually when I did it. As soon as I sent out the first kind of few, my palms started to sweat. They're sweating right now. That's where I feel when I know that I'm going into a growth zone and I'm doing something that's big, is my hands turn hot like fire and wet. And the first time I noticed that was when I did my yoga teacher training, which could be another story. But I had a friend that has known me for a really long time and goes, here are some words, but there's many words, because we always continue to grow. And it's not just words that I have for you, but feelings. And when I see you, or when I see your name pumps up, it's really feelings, parentheses, and not in a creepy way. But it was just, I think that somatic, what happens to your body when you see certain people who are your touchstones in your life, that you can come back to say, am I still living me? Am I still being me, or have I kind of lost who I was? So as scary as this project was, and I'm still getting messages back, because some people are taking some time and have said, I want to think about it. And some people might not answer back, and that's okay too. But it's been a lot. It's not what I expected it to be. And lots of positive words, but also finding that darkness likes to pop out still, of seeing it going, I don't know if that's true. Even though someone's saying this is their truth, and I question it because I don't feel it, but that's okay. So it's been a really interesting, the experiment's not done. I'm not too sure what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to use that. But I know when these people that I reached out to, I do have strong feelings for them. We don't always see the same thing. And I don't expect us to see the same thing, because we come from different lives and different experiences. So yeah, that's a little bit of my ongoing experiment, and I've done it. It came out of, and when I worked in hospitals and I worked in day treatment programs for mental health, we would do different interventions and different practices and kind of groups around talking to people and sharing what they thought of them without kind of judgment, like what comes up, or what do I appreciate about you? Why do I want to spend time with you? What is important about our relationship? What do I value about you? We have to, from asking somebody else to do that, I need to do that for myself, because that's vulnerable and that's scary. So it's kind of where it came from, in this really Wednesday night. Let's find out for real. Or not real. I don't know.
Well, I appreciate that you said, it's I can't remember the exact words you used, but getting to know yourself, because that's what I try to hammer home to my undergraduate students, right? Mm-hmm. It's an excellent opportunity to use these skills to get to know yourself better, and self-application, so that then you can, if you don't know how to do these things or apply these things to yourself, how can you help somebody else? So I really appreciate that. I think undergraduate or college is a great time to do that. But then, we get out into the professional field as social workers. Some of us might be clinicians, or you might be case manager or a professor like me. And the fact of the matter is almost all of these jobs in social work that I've mentioned, you are super busy. You have a lot of responsibility. And sometimes you can kind of lose yourself in that, right? Like you realize a couple of years have passed and you're like, well, what am I doing? Who am I, right? And if you don't ask yourself and you don't ponder those things and reflect and participate in the experiment or exercises like you're talking about, you just don't know. And you might end up, not by any choice of yours, but just by circumstance, ending up in a place that you didn't ever intend to be. You know what I mean? And I think that goes along with being older as well. I'm 42, and when I was 40, I did a similar experiment. I had just moved back to Alaska from Hawaii. I was feeling reflective. I had not all these, but I had several familiar relationships that were just kind of not where they should be. And I sat down, I don't know how many either, because I didn't count them, but I wrote a card to everybody that I could think of in my first, because I figure 40, you don't know how long you're going to live, but that's a good measure for about halfway, somewhere along there.
Yeah, midlife, that came up this year for me.
And so I sent everybody that I could think of that I was thankful for a letter or a card. And I just said, hey, I just want you to know I'm thankful for the role that you played in my life, because I had a lot of struggles and I wouldn't have made it this far without the little things or the big things that you had done. And it made me think I wanted to ask you, because I had to go through my own process with this, with insecurity. If folks didn't respond or they didn't acknowledge it, and that should be okay, right? You don't have to respond. When somebody sends me a thank you note, I don't always respond. That's them. They're sending me the thank you.
Or else it goes, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you for thanking me.
No, thank you. Exactly. And so I had to work through a little bit of an insecurity, if I didn't get the results, that even if I said I didn't mind whatever the result was, there's little bits of me, that I didn't that wasn't telling the truth, that I wanted this or that to happen. And some it did and some it didn't. And I really had to work through that and just have that acceptance for myself that everybody doesn't buy into my experiments or my things. And everybody doesn't think the way I do. And not everybody is good at sitting down and writing a letter. And so it could
or
be
finding
any number
words.
Of reasons. Exactly. Right. And it may make them uncomfortable themselves to dive into those emotions and whatnot. And so I had to work through that. What about you? Because you're right in the process of it. How do you feel about it? Are there any insecurities swirling around?
Absolutely. Insecurities, actually, a lot of the insecurities, or one insecurity in particular that shows up for me is, and it's a bit of a voice that has been in my head a long time, is, who the hell am I to think that I'm so special that I should be able to ask these people these questions? And that their initial response is, man, Zenia's arrogant. That's a fear. That's really real. And I had to go, well, okay, maybe that is what they think. And I don't know if anyone thought that. There's people that haven't answered. There's people that haven't answered that I'm not surprised haven't answered, because if they asked me, it would take me some time. And it would take me some time, not because I don't love them and appreciate them, but because relationships are also going to shift and change based on what's happening in each of our individual lives. And sometimes we don't mesh. And there's a lot of people in my life, through blood or not blood, right? Family of origin versus family of choice, that have done this. But I think a couple things that happened in the few weeks before that made this come up to me is I ran into two friends that I'd known since I was really little. Here's the vulnerability, my first boyfriend and the first time I ever kissed a boy. And the first time I went on a date, and his mom picked us up in the car. We went to the movies. And look at me, I feel like a dork because I'm all in that. But I saw him at a grocery store. I hadn't seen him probably in a bazillion years. And I just looked at him and I went, and it wasn't like this puppy dog love, but it was a sense of safety of, I remembered what I felt like at that age. And he was a memory of that age. And it was when we were 10 and life was a little bit more carefree. And, I didn't have the stresses I do as a business owner, as a mom, as a social worker that's responsible for people's health and well-being and feeding my kids, which sometimes feels really, really, really difficult. And it was just such a, and it took me back and it allowed me to soften. And then 2 days later, my very first friend that I met probably when I was weeks old, we're 3 weeks apart. Our families lived across the street from each other, and our moms met by both reversing out of their driveways at the same time and rear-ending each other. And I saw her 15 years ago, very briefly, when I was working at a beer store, a liquor store, and she was passing through. And I before that, I probably haven't seen her since I was about 17. And we watched all of her home movies and we felt that body, and it just felt like I hadn't seen her before. And she is one of the people, that I only saw her yesterday. It just felt so natural and so real. And it was wonderful because I thought how much she meant to me, even though I hadn't seen her for 20 years, and that stayed, and she had the same feeling. So I think now, in reflection of it, those two situations, those spontaneous kind of situations, alongside me going through the change process. My eldest kid just started high school this year. There's a lot of big changes happening, and I went, okay, now I'm midlife. What do I do next? And how can I make this next part of my life just a little softer and a little sweeter? Because working in social work, we're always, I don't know, I've always been ready for a fight, to fight for my clients, or to things, and to battle in a way which goes so against of who I feel like I am in nature, and like that. And I wanted to change that, and I wanted to know if what I felt inside is what other people saw, or if I was really good at tightening that stuff inside and showing something different, and what part of it is authentic and what part of it is a mask for safety or for security or for professional reasons, where we have to kind of, I just had a brutal day and I did something that was yucky and I feel crappy about it. And then I come into a place, can I be real about that? I feel like I have to.
Let me ask you this. How hard is that to do when you're in those modes where you're being, because I heard you say it in your own language earlier, you're being hard on yourself, right? Or maybe you were reflecting about being hard on yourself in the past. And I've always been super hard on myself, and it really doesn't reflect my reality sometimes, it reflects my old reality.
Yeah.
And so when we're exploring these things, here we are in our middle age, even though I don't like to look at it that way. I know I'm at middle age, but I still look at my uncles as they're in middle age, but they're actually beyond it a little bit now.
I know.
It's funny how you get older and you see people the same way. They don't age as much because you're aging. But how hard is it to do, as we're caught up in so many things in the world, right? Like every day in this, in 2024, most of us are going to wake up and you're going to start thinking about your emails, getting your cup of coffee, all the things you got to do today, whether you see clients, whether I got to grade homework, plan a module. I mean, all of us have different things, right? But I saw this wheel recently, where it's talking about self-reflection. And to get in there, it's hard because you have so many things that are taking your attention out. Facebook, Instagram, whatever, all you want to go through, your emails, the news, politics, your job, your email, all these things.
The text messages,
even your kids, kids are a positive thing, but it still pulls on your attention and takes it away. So if you had the center you're trying to get through, but you have so many things pulling you out to the horizon, and not to mention, to add to that, our past, right? Our past lives we're talking about as we're here in our 40s, reflecting on, midlife crisis or maybe midlife transformation. Well, sometimes we're at least to some degree, all of us are stuck with something with our past, right? And we're holding so tight to it, even though it would benefit us to let it go and either live in the present or move forward. So what do you think about that? How hard is that for you? And what are some tools you have to get out here, all the things pulling you away, and come back? Because you have to be centered somewhat to even do the exercise that you did, to even just to think about it and to plan it out.
It's that a Buddhist saying, Buddha specifically, but that chop wood before enlightenment, we have to chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, we have to chop wood and carry water. I think depending on the day you ask me, I'll tell you how hard it is. Some days it's really hard. And it takes a lot of work. And those are the days. What I think makes it really hard is the feeling of being alone. Because it's ultimately something I have to do, right? I use my friends. We reflect with our friends, right? And those safe people, and hey, I'm going through some stuff and I'm having a hard time. But ultimately, I'm the one that has to do it. So on those really hard days, it feels really lonely. And that's connected to, some things in my past where people have left for lots of different reasons, because they've died, most of them. And that actually, I think, is what really motivates me to do the hard work and to chop the wood and to carry the water. And I miss the wood and I cut myself, and sometimes I dump the water. But I have to keep going, because what else is there? right? Like, I want to be here. I want to be here in this world and live. So I have to do the work. And I look around at what is important to me. And when I am stuck in that, and I look at my kids, and then I have to go into mom brain, and I feel kind of fragmented again, because then Zenia goes away a little bit, like the holistic Zenia, and the mom comes out. And if I'm so focused on being the mom, I get resentful and I get angry, and then I'm not a good mom. So then I do have to find a way to come back and see those kids of going, they're asking for me, as much as they're bugging me and saying, Mom, I need this. Because I did something else super fun today, talk about it in a bit, but they're asking me because I'm also safe with them. And that is also what I want. And that is what Zenia wants. I want people to feel safe around me, because I want to feel safe around as many people as I can. I want to feel safe in my life. And when we've come from traumas, I've come from traumas, and some are still very acute and alive and well. We have to have something to focus on to bring us forward. And I just hope that if I keep going, this is where spirituality and faith, I know we've talked about yoga and how that is, makes me go, if I'm getting through, I've survived all of them already. And I did it by myself, ultimately, and with community. So that balancing between what is community and then what is kind of, I hate this word, but like that codependence piece, and how to find our individual self in relationship to all of those like circles and groups and networks that we live in, from the plants, from the earth that we're on, and the seasons, to our kids, to our work, to our environments, and what it means when you show up as a professor in social work, and what it means when you show up at the homeless shelter, and what it means when I show up in private practice, in, a fairly affluent, whatever that means, area where people can afford, they have a job, that they have benefits, or they have enough money that they can pay. And how do we all individually fit into that as we continue to grow with our own experiences and with the witnessing of the other's pains, when they've said, here's my pain, or here's my struggle, I was told you can help me. I don't know, what do you think?
I mean, I think a lot. There's so many things that we can touch on that you're talking about, and I think one of the things comes back to, just to add on, is the sense of, and you mentioned it either yesterday or earlier, the idea of the roles that you have to play, right? As as a professor, as a therapist, as a social worker, as a professional, as a member of this, as a member of that, as a parent, right? Even as a parent, I try to be authentic, but you do play a role you have responsibility and you have to do certain things. And so how, when you're in those, whether you're parenting, whether you're, leading yoga, or, doing, interviewing a client, anything like that, when you are feeling it, when you're feeling the same thing that they may be describing to you, how is it that you're able to center yourself and still perform as a social worker or as a parent? How do you recenter yourself to that authenticity when it's, when you're hurting yourself or when it's slipping away from you?
When I catch it, I now start to congratulate myself. So instead of catching myself and being like, oh, wow, you just went dark, or wow, you just went to a shitty place, or oh, that was there. I catch it and I congratulate myself for noticing. And then, because that's now I'm back online, and now I'm actually back and present because I've noticed it. I talk about this a lot when I talk with people about mindfulness or meditation. They practice meditation, or we do a guided practice, and they're like, oh, that was good, but I was so distracted all the time. Like, I was super distracted, and it took me a really long time to get into the practice. I'll say, so that moment that you recognize that you were distracted, that's actually when you came back online. So what happens if you just go, I'm back online, let's go back? That is my practice right now. It's changed. Sometimes it was just, I'd notice it, I'd feel it in my body, and I'd intentionally go, just exhale. Also an easy practice. But right now I'm congratulating myself. I'm giving myself a pat on the back, because I've recognized in where I'm at, I need a cheerleader. So I can be my own cheerleader. And when I get distracted or when I have a negative thought and I recognize it and I see it, I go, good for you for noticing that.
Did you always have a dialogue with yourself?
Always.
And how did you...
That was a quick answer.
How have you shaped that as time has went on? Because I'm guessing it's changed, that dialogue has changed, and you have more, a little bit, I don't want to use the word control, but a little bit more influence.
I write it down. I talk. I have to say it out loud. So the dialogue changes as I start to see it. So I've been writing it. I always wrote it. I always journaled. I always wrote. I always wanted to tell stories. I would actually came from a negative place, and I'm now retelling that story in a new way. I was always like, oh, here's Zenia the storyteller. I'm looking at it, and right now I'm writing, and when I look at it and I see it, I go, okay, I'm not forcing myself to try to change it because it was real in that moment. It might not be real now, but in that moment that I had it, that I recognized it, or that I wrote it down, it was something that felt very real, even if it was clouded. So I congratulate myself for noticing. And now I'm questioning, whose voice is that? Because it's not mine, actually.
That's interesting. When I've thought and reflected about this extensively, and when I was a child, I didn't have the greatest life. I had, we were poor, and I was bullied and lived in a place that I didn't fit in, and things like that. And there used to be a voice, I shouldn't say there used to be, but the voice that I recognize now was there a long time ago. And it would tell me logical things, and like things about the way I should feel and about certain things. And basically, as I got older, all my peers and the world basically told me, they shut that voice out and told me everything else. And I believed those things. And as I got older, started researching different spirituality, practicing different things. And there's several different, lenses to look at things through that tell you that you have inner divinity. There's many different cultures or religions or ways, like I said, lenses that have you look at it. And I started thinking about it, like, where, do I have a voice? Where's my voice at? Because it seems like I had lost it somewhere. And the more work I did, the more I realized that I actually wasn't gaining anything. I was removing the barriers to be able to hear that same voice that was always there, and it has never steered me wrong. Mm-hmm. When I make bad decisions, when I, lash out at somebody or something like that, that's when I'm not listening to whatever that heart wisdom or that voice or that inner consciousness, the inner divinity, whatever you want to call it. When I listen to that, it always steers me right. It's that my issue is, how do I get out of all that stuff of the world? You know what I mean? That's plaguing me, and I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking about that, and so it's the same stuff. It's drowning it out. And so to really be deliberate about it, and one of my tools would be just when I get there, it's amazing how much breath can do for you, and just, I wasn't even aware of my breathing. Just the one breath makes a world of difference. And if you can, take that further, but even just one breath, being aware of it, takes you right here, right? That's one thing that you're always doing that much of us are not aware of.
It's always accessible. It's always there.
Yes, right? Always. And when you are upset, I challenge you to check your breathing. I used to overlook that kind of thing when I used to be an angry youngster, and people would tell me, like, check your breathing, check your body. And I'd be like, what?
Yeah.
What do you mean? I don't have the awareness to do that. I mean, I wouldn't have had that vocabulary back then, but I read a study recently, and I don't remember the exact percentage, but it was over 50%. And it said the study said that they had interviewed Americans, and over 50% of them said that they do not have an inner dialogue. And at first I was like, that's troubling signs for America if that's the case. But it made me, when you were talking about it, it made me want to ask you, as a professional social worker that's been practicing for an extensive amount of time, meeting, you've gotten to know lots of different individuals. Do you think that those 50% or 50% plus don't actually have an inner dialogue, or they're not aware of it?
I think they're not aware of it. Because and I want to thank you for sharing about that inner voice, that deep inner knowing voice doesn't steer me wrong either. The voice that clouds me from it are other people's voices, other things that get in my way. And that's when when I go, is this one mine? And most of the times those other ones that are the self-directed inner critical aren't mine, right? They aren't my voices. They're somebody else's voices. They're other people's voices. And sometimes I know who those voices are specifically.
And sometimes an imagined or perceived that's not true about how they, right?
Yeah. But when you said the quickest thing is your breath, it is that, right? And I love, because you're like, take that deep breath, right? You did it. And that is for me, I'm feeling it out. Because when we're scared and when we're nervous and our nervous system is going and we're about to be attacked by that saber-toothed tiger or whatever that threat is, we will go, we are underwater. We tend to hold in. So what happens when you then go, that actually, I think, and I know there's research and I'm not going to quote it because I don't remember. My best research is me. I'll say that first of all. I noticed that brought me back to center a lot quicker than breathing in. Because I would breathe in and I would hold and I would still be tense. But it's a lot harder to be tense when we're empty. When we've released, when we've let go. Or surrendered our breath, knowing that it's going to come back.
I can confirm that with some research, my own, just like yours. And I would just say that, just real quick, is that even this morning, I've had some anxiety just for like 3 days. And I go through these little stints, and it's usually when I just have a lot of work and I'm staring at the computer and I'm overwhelmed. And so there's too much going on in my brain and I can't go through it all. You know what I mean? And there's too much going on in your brain, listen to your heart, right? And now I'm losing track of my thoughts. But
exhale research.
I'm just trying to reflect. So this morning, I feel like, almost like there's a pulse in my body. I can almost feel like an exaggerated pulse. And I'll get in these things where I'm like, I don't have anything specific, there's nothing bad in my life really at all, right? Like super bad. It's just I'm overwhelmed and I got all these things to do, and my body gets into this higher frequency, and I mean that in a bad way. Like everything's moving it's revolving too fast. And I'll try my breathing techniques, which are usually really easy, right? Just a simple breath. But sometimes I notice, like this morning, that the exhale's not happening really. And then I have to I do this visualization, imagination process where I imagine all the things that are bothering me, all the things that are causing me anxiety, and I blow them out, like I literally try to, okay, I'm letting it go. I'm forcing it out. I'm getting it out of here, and I try to visualize it. And, it doesn't always work instantaneously, but then I walk away from the situation and I realize it's not here anymore. The anxiety has left. And even before this, I entered this episode, and I wasn't anxious about the actual episode, but, before this morning, I just had a lot going on, and I practiced those things. Luckily, in this apartment we're staying in, this condo, we have a sauna. So I went and sat in the sauna, and I did the breathing, and I was still like, still feeling it. And then I got out, showered off, started setting up the podcast stuff, and I was like, it did work. You know what I mean? And so that I fully believe in that out breath, and I think that you can visualize stuff and you can literally let things go. And I mean, even to take it further, we'll talk about yoga in a little bit, but me practicing yoga, the different exercises, the different like hip stretches. I have very tight hips, and they talk about like stress can be stored in your hips and shoulders and elsewhere, right? Well, like when I was introduced to yoga and I started practicing it, my hips started to totally change, and I could move and sleep in different ways that I hadn't before. And it was almost like all these things started released, like there literally was these things that I had trapped inside my body, these emotions, these feelings, these memories that were trapped in there. And then along with like that 40-year-old practice, the experiment that I did, sending people letters and kind of let go of things, like it really worked. And I just say these things because when I was in rehab for meth 20 years ago, we had some guy come in and talk to us about breathwork and yoga. And I was like, this guy's a kook. He can't. And I mean, it was before, yoga really became mainstream. in America and all that and breath work. But I was like, yeah, whatever. And then, you know, it's too bad because I wish I'd have listened to him because, you know, whatever I learned 10 to 20 years later, it really did work. And so I encourage anybody that's listening to this podcast, experiment with things like breath work. You can go on YouTube and find thousands of different people that practice breath work, or Instagram or whatever, different yogic exercises. A lot of people say to me, just same thing I used to say to myself, that's not for me. I can't do that stuff. But trust me, you can, even if you just do a little bits, and some of these traumas you got worked up in there, and you'll be like, well, no, I haven't moved like this in a long time. And it's not just the physical, it's the emotional release, it's the memory release, it's whatever, the trauma even potentially.
Yeah.
And it's been stored and trapped inside our bodies, right? And you gotta let it go. I keep talking about we hold so tight to things that can be not good for us sometimes. Let it go, right? And that can be one of the hardest things to do in life is let go.
Yeah. I want to keep talking about that. I want to I want to jump on when you said that you were in rehab 20 years ago when you were learning breath work. And one of my first jobs where I really actually went, yeah, this is yoga therapy. And I know yoga therapy is a thing. And, you know, and talking outside of yoga as therapy, I should say, because this was before even like the International Association of Yoga Therapists and, you know, Richard Miller's work. But I taught yoga at a 28-day residential recovery treatment center.
That's exactly how long I was there. 28
Yeah.
days.
I don't think you were where I was though. I was in Canada. It was neat. It was such a cool, amazing experience. And I felt so blessed and honored to be accepted into that because I was met with a lot of, I used to say like they're big dudes, like big burly dudes. A lot of them came from working out in the oil rigs and at me and be like, who, okay, you know, is this girl coming in to teach us yoga. And it didn't take long. It was so cool to watch, really like, oh, I can do this, I can do that. And oh, what is this going to do? And within minutes of breath, as soon as one had the buy-in and did it, and then they all had it. And class was full every single time. It was mandatory, but you know, people wouldn't come. Can't really as much, but it was such a powerful realization and experience, not just for them, but it was for me too. And that validation that like, yeah, like, look at this, look how it can change just our way of being and the softening that occurred. And then, like you said, the story, like now, sometimes when I do that exhale, I feel it in my body and you can't hear it, but just doing that and having that exhale, like self-adjustments, right? The body starts to be more free and then I can move. And I said at the beginning, I'm 45, but my brain still feels like I'm 25. I don't run marathons. I don't do anything. I'm moderate in my well-being, right? I do the best that I can. But I do think a lot of it is because I get on my mat every day. And it's not that I do a 45-minute or an hour and a half, like hardcore Ashtanga. I get on my mat and I breathe and I maybe do 15 minutes here and there. And the days I don't do it, they're very challenging. They're painful and they're suffering. 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes. What does 3 exhales do? And then just start to notice it. But I like to invite the reflection afterwards to write it down because we forget. We forget that it's so simple. I think that I have to be in the studio and I have to be in this perfect thing where like, no, you can do it everywhere.
That's a challenge of mine because when I got started to yoga, it was on a DVD series like 10 years ago or something. And now, you know, there's all sorts of stuff available. But I get in these things where like, I can't do yoga unless I'm going to sit down and do an hour of power yoga, right? That's what I want. I want to get in shape. I like the high it gets me and all that. But then it prevents me from being able to just, I'd say 2 things actually. 1, practice like individually without some kind of external source telling me what exactly to do. You know, and 2, being able to get it in where it fits in, right?
Mhm.
You know, like the 15 minutes you have in the morning or wherever, you know, in your office or wherever. And I'll do certain things, but I still really struggle with that. My brain tells me falsely, it, it falsely tells me that if I don't go big, I can't do it at all. And that's not true. And it's something that I really have a priority to change in the way that I practice.
We want it, the striving for it to be perfect. So we have that, like, because when you've experienced it, right? When you've experienced, like you said, that high that you get from that 90-minute class. And we're so attached to that. It's like that, no pain, no gain thing. I don't know. That's one of those things like, well, you got to work hard and you got to push through and you got to do all this. And yeah, we do have to chop wood and carry water, but I don't have to do it so hard. And that was a lesson that I learned during the pandemic, during lockdown. And where I craved having, and I'm privileged in the sense that I've always worked at a studio or been connected with a studio or had a studio. So I always had a place that I could go to, even if there wasn't a class, a big empty space to go and have this glorious, perfect practice. And then I couldn't. And I struggled and it was hard. And then I remembered, oh yeah, you are a social worker and you would go and do nervous system regulation or emotional regulation, I think is what we kind of called it a lot before, with these incredible dudes in the center where you were doing it outside or you were in the tree, or I'd look at my kids and they would just be striking a yoga pose because they're playing freeze tag and then breathing. And I went, well, I can do it here. And I started just sitting in my kid's room with him and be like, you play and I'm going to do a little bit of yoga. And it's okay that the incense isn't burning and the music isn't playing. Dog is now on my mat and my cat is now on my mat. And then my kid would start to do it with me. And then we move into co-regulation. And then that's where we can change the world. Where yoga, I think, is revolutionary in that sense of community and sharing.
And I think you just said it very well that, I've been pushing revolutionary social work. And Alicia's actually has what she calls revolutionary yoga. But revolutionary social work, what you just said fits right in there, right? Because, a lot of us get into this, especially with the way movements happen these days, that you think that the way to make change is only to go and march and protest and to challenge the system in these ways. And I'm not saying do or don't do any of those things. It's not my point. My point is that from a revolutionary social work perspective, real change, societally, systematically, for that to happen, a precursor for that would be for you to have revolutionary change within yourself. And there's many ways you can look at that, right? We could look at it as we were talking about breath work, meditation, doing little experiments or things to push you along the way, reflection. But yoga is another one of those things, because yoga kind of encompasses all of those things. Depending on, there's a lot of different ways you can do it individually, obviously, which take you inwards. You could listen to somebody else and follow their pattern, and they often have very, reflective, profound things to say. But it really revolutionizes you if you're practicing regularly, whether you're getting on the mat for an hour of power yoga, but even like when you said, some if you don't have time, some breaths in the morning, that's yoga, right? That's yoga that's practicing yoga. And that can be hard in itself. To me, 5 minutes of telling myself I'm going to sit here with nothing and breathe and go inward is almost harder for me to wrap my finger around and talk myself into than it is to do the hour of power yoga. But I'm getting off track here. My point is just that yoga in a lot of ways epitomizes revolutionary social work, right? It's a personal transformation that allows you to be a better individual, a more authentic, in tune with the universe, with yourself, human being, social worker, so that you're able to work with other folks, right? And you come prepared for that. And then it's like throwing the pebble into the pond. It starts to go out and you influence other people. I influence people through being a professor. Not everyone, and everybody buys into everything that I have or do. Mm-hmm. But it puts me in a unique place through my own personal transformation to subtly change the world. And I think we're always looking for, it's election season here in the United States. So everybody's thinking, if you elect this person, or if you elect this person, or if this person gets in, it's going to be terrible. And if you elect this person, it's going to be great. And people have different perspectives on that. But the reality is the only way that things really, really, truly change is if we all change ourselves and we change collectively in that way together. And then the next generation perhaps can have those profound changes. But there is no policy or no tax cut or extra tax that's going to change all that for everyone. It's embedded within us, right? And so we have to change those things. And yoga is, if not the best, one of the very best tools in order to do so. Wouldn't you agree?
I would 100% agree because, well, for lots of reasons, but one of the things that's jumping out, and I'm laughing because I shared with you another thing that I did today, this morning, was in part of my birthday celebration. I said, I don't want gifts. I want to do something. I want to experience something. So my family took me to goat yoga, where we do yoga with goats. And I like goats. My grandmother had a goat named Samantha. Again, another story. My husband and I, like, we're goats, Marco, goats. We just would always, one day we're going to have goats. I know it's going to happen. But we went to goat yoga and I had no idea what to expect. And my kids were asking me, well, what are we going to do? I'm like, I do yoga with goats. I knew what it was going to be like. That they're probably going to be jumping on us and getting on our backs and doing stuff as we lead a class. It's kind of exactly what it was. We came in and they take us around the farm and we go into this like little gated pen area where it's for the baby goats to play. So it's got, tires and ramps and just put your mat down anywhere. Okay, put my mat down anywhere. Like, where's the teacher gonna be? Because full disclosure, I haven't attended an in-person yoga class for a while. Since before, for sure before the pandemic. So I'll do videos. I do a lot of my own internal practice, but I haven't done that. So I was very, well, where's she going to be? Where should I sit? Kind of like wanting to be that proper student. So she's talking about it. She's introducing us to this goat yoga and she's telling us these goats are going to come in. And I thought maybe it was going to be like 4 or 5, but it was probably like 30 goats. They come out and she's like, okay, take a deep breath. And we're doing some seated sun breaths, and then these goat comes in, and she's full disclosure of like, you might do the physical practice of yoga, you might not. And it came in, and I have a video of myself going, this isn't yoga, but laughing about it. Because as soon as I said it, I'm like, oh, but it is the physical. It's not hatha yoga. It's not the physical practice, the asana practice. It is yoga practice. Do you know what I mean by that difference between the practice of yoga and then I'm doing yoga? Right?
Yeah, but you might want to talk about it a little bit more for everyone else.
The doing of yoga, I find, is I'm going to go to a class and I'm going to go do yoga. I'm going to go do a yoga class. And there's absolutely can still be spirituality in it. Really, I'm going to go and do it. I'm going to do these motions and I'm going to get a sweat or I'm going to find inner peace or I'm just going to feel better about myself. Great. Then the practice of yoga is really coming into a state of being where we're connected and where there's a balance or a sense of equanimity. That's my definition of yoga, of like the real true practice of yoga is a state of being where we need to actually intentionally move towards it. And we get those moments of being in it, like bliss, where it's like, this is the yoga, everything's connected. So as soon as I said, this isn't yoga, in like a cheeky kind of like roll my eyes sort of way, laughing, I went, it absolutely is. Because it was connection. And it was connection with the earth. And it was, I did think about, did the goats like it? Or like, that kind of, I'm paying for this. These goats are coming out. They're getting picked up. They're putting on people. They're jumping around. Do they really like it or do they not like it? It was actually really well done. So it is. It is yoga because I'm just softening into it. And yoga is what it does when you move into a state of yoga. When I move into a state of yoga, it's flow. It's meditation and motion. So I'm a Kripalu yoga teacher, meaning when I was formally introduced to yoga to really understand the study of yoga was at the same time as I did my undergrad in social work. And it means compassion. It was that 3 stage of I'm willfully going to do it. I'm going to do the yoga. I'm going to drop my shoulders back and pull my arms up and I'm going to, my Dirga Ujjayi breath. And then it's the balance. Stage 2 is what I call the dance. The balance, that movement, that fluid between will and surrender. And the surrender comes in as soon as there's an exhale. To then ultimate surrender or meditation in motion, where you just start doing your own thing and you're guided. It doesn't matter what the teacher on the screen is saying or what the goat is doing next to you. Where you go into that and that place of pure surrender. And in a structured yoga class of doing yoga, that's often shavasana, right? That surrender or that moment of peace and stillness. And that's really the practice of yoga, because that's where it comes in, the dark and the light, and it integrates, and it can be uncomfortable. For many people, that the voices come in. I feel like I totally went off on a bit of a tangent, but I'll stop talking now to land.
No, it's all good. You had a lot of good things to say. My question is, so what do the goats contribute? Tell us about it. Like, give us a visualization. What is goat yoga?
Yoga, yeah. So the goat, it actually, well, so it's that on paper. They said, they're living being things, which means they're gonna go poop and they're gonna pee. So they said that. They're like, if we would say if you got pooped on or pooped come on your mat, it's a blessing, which I thought was kind of funny. But it was, they came in and to be on their level, to be close to the ground and to listen and to respond to them and to see what it is that I wanted to do. Like, come over here, goat. I want you to get on my back, right? Because then I'm doing goat yoga and it's good picture and like, ha ha ha, look, I'm doing that. And you really quickly realize then that's when it makes it unethical. And that's when it's not congruent with yoga, because I'm forcing this being. But when I just went into it, and when we all went into it, because there was probably about 20, there's 4 of us, there's probably about 20 participants. And you just had to stop. You had to slow down. Because those goats don't give up about what you're doing and what posture you want to look at and what, how your downward dog is. They're going to just come over and be like, I like you, now pet me or scratch me or headbutt you. So it makes you be very present in the moment and very aware, which is yoga. Did they jump on my back? Yes. Did they poo on my mat? Yes. Did they pee on our mats? Yes. And they moved away and they didn't, but it was kind of weird. We were in the shade, so I think some of that was part of the shade. But we had about 10 goats around us. And the teacher was even laughing. She's like, I don't know what's going over in that corner over there. But they just swarmed us and lie down and had a nap. So then there's this big obstacle right in the middle of my mat. So I can't, as the teacher goes, you can, she still, was saying, if you want to, if you can move into this posture. You can move into that posture. The goats told you when they were done and they started walking away to the pen. They let them out and they went back into their quiet time. They do one a day. And if the goats don't want to come, they don't force them. But it was neat.
And my experience with goats, which is not a ton, but I grew up in farm country and lots of people had goats, and besides eating everything, they do have a lot of similarities to people. Their kids are named kids, first of all. If you look at mythology, right, the faun, the half goat, half human is a huge thing in many different mythological cultures and mythological stories. Matter of fact, one of my favorite movies is Pan's Labyrinth with the faun in it. But it just makes me wonder, like, you said it before, do the goats like it? What do they think about it? And they probably don't think too much about it, period. But I wonder, I think what I was trying to get to was that my experience with goats is that if they don't like you, they won't come, or if they don't want to do something, they won't. They're very stubborn that way. And if they do like it, they'll be very stubborn to get it. And so the fact that they come over there and interact with you all says that they must get something out of it. There's
an exchange. For them They looked pretty happy. Like I said, my grandmother had a goat, the goat named Samantha. When she didn't like what you were doing, you knew it. Because either she wouldn't come near you or she would buck you. Like she would headbutt you. Like that's it. So
Yeah.
there's a big respect, and I'm not the boss in there. So I think it's another thing of surrendering the ego that showed up in there. For me, anyways, I can't talk about everybody else, right? There may have been other people that were really pissed off because the goats weren't coming and they didn't enjoy the experience, but I did. Okay. My kids did. My husband did. I don't think of what it really gave me was joy and an opportunity to really truly experience it and be in it. And we didn't do a lot of movement, and it was an hour experience. It was so powerful that we were all exhausted afterwards, and that like nourished. I just did a 10K hike. I just did a 90-minute power yoga class, and we were like on the way home. That's what it gave
Well,
me.
one of the cool things about it for me, just to hear about it, is just the simple practice of connecting with animals. And so often in this world today, we many of us eat meat, right? Eat animal flesh, but we don't know where it comes from. We don't have any connection to it. So, some people still hunt and stuff, but lots of the meat in our world today comes from factory farming and whatnot. And so we don't have any connection to that at all. And many of us live in cities and don't have connection to nature. We're in Alaska, so there's connection to nature here, but many folks don't really have a whole lot of that anymore. And so it's just heartening to me to have a different practice or idea for folks to have the opportunity. Not everyone's it's not gonna work for everybody. Everybody's not gonna go in there and have profound, deep connections with the goats, and many people aren't gonna be ready for that, nor are they even looking for that. I think just the fact that there's opportunities there for folks to connect with animals, it's sweet. That's what I want for my family in the future. We talk about it all the time, but we want somewhere where we can have lots of animals. So I'm not like a small talk person, like when I'm at the university or wherever, small talk gives me the heebie-jeebies. I don't know what it is about it, but I don't like it. And it's always made me a little uncomfortable. And what I would really like, rather than having to participate in small, I'm not, if you know me, don't hesitate to stop and talk to me. I'm over exaggerating how much I don't like small talk. It's just a little uncomfortable to me in certain situations. But what I would really like is to be welcomed home by an animal or by animals, several animals that I have a connection with that are happy to see me. And I can tell from the way that they behave towards me, and they don't expect too much from me and all that. And I think part of it is so many people expect so many things from me these days, right? And so it's nice to have, I'm not saying an animal doesn't expect anything from you, but for the most part, they're expecting basic, your basic attention, maybe food, things like that. And so that's what I want. And I'm thankful that there's opportunities out there for folks to connect in different ways. And obviously practicing yoga with animals present is a great way to do it. I wonder about what it would be like with, say, cats. And I've had a cat around where I did yoga, and they just acted like a cat, and didn't care that I was doing yoga and come lay underneath me or something like that.
I have a cat named
I wonder
Larry.
about like a cat cafe or something.
His name is Larry, and he will come up and bang on the door if my door is shut and I'm practicing. He knows the dog comes, they know, and they both just lie on my mat or lie on me. And it was very similar to the goat yoga. And I think they're being the cats and the dogs, but I also think that they're drawn to the energy and the connection and we're co-regulating. And that can be my yoga too, is I can be on the mat and I can do one posture, and then the cat comes and I sit there and I pet the cat, because what else am I doing there? I'm breathing and I'm being really present in the moment. And it's cool to have all of these. I live in a place that is surrounded by a lot of horse farms, so there's a lot of opportunities for equine therapy and getting out and being with the horses. A really good friend of mine, a fellow social worker, has horses, and she's shared with me how she now comes down in the mornings, and she's doing her yoga teacher training as well, and she's been a social worker for many years. And she goes, my practice. And it turned practice. What your yoga is your practice. Like, my husband didn't do yoga for a really long time, but his practice, his yoga was chopping wood. Like, quite literally, We don't need to do it for anything other than the fact that we just like having like fires outside. So people literally drop off wood because that's his yoga. Goes to the horses and goes, I just sit there. And there's something like the connection, the way that the animals, when you look at them and you actually make that connection and they make eye contact with you, I think is so incredibly profound that it can scare people. Can touch something that they touch something that maybe we're not ready yet to see. And it's like a little, are you ready? Little make contact. Nope. Okay. I'll be here.
Yeah. And, in addition to that, what can be scary is getting to know ourselves sometimes too. I think you get that same thing because we've been so distracted for so long that it can be hard. And even today for me, sometimes I'm like, oh, I got to go through the feeling of discomfort and get in there. Well, we're going on an hour right now, and we have an audience, and I haven't even addressed or said welcome to you all. And so I want to say thank you for tuning in to the live recording. And if you have a question or a comment, or you can pop that in the chat, or you can also use the call-in feature. I think at least when I did it several months ago, you could only do it via the computer. So if you're on a phone, maybe they've changed that by now. But you should have the call-in feature if you want to join us and chat with us for a minute or have a question you want to ask in person. But let's transition a little bit and we've dabbled in social work a little bit, and it's all social work, but let's get into social work a little bit. And the first question I had for you, and if everybody's listening doesn't know this, you are in Canada, over there on the east side of Canada. And so when you put your license or certification, what is that? Is certified? I can't remember what you put. Certified.
We're registered. There's no licensing here yet. Registered. Yep. So I'm a registered social worker, an RSW, registered social work here in Ontario, Canada, with a Bachelor of Social Work and a Master's of Social Work. In every province, you have to be a registered social worker. To be a social worker, you have to go to an accredited social work school, which is federally run, and then each province is individually governed by a college. So each province has their own registration process. They're very similar, but different. One of the provinces more out west in British Columbia, I believe they have a different designation where you can be a registered social worker and then you can be a registered clinical social worker. In Ontario, there's no such thing as a registered clinical social worker. So little kind of differences and subtle differences that were slippery to navigate because they can be confusing at times, but registered social workers. What do I do?
Tell us about the work that you do.
Yeah. So currently I'm in private practice. I've been in private practice for 5 years. So here's that Here I Grow Again. The year I turned 40 is when I surrendered it all and I left the union pensioned, hospital, school board jobs, those systems, which sometimes we would refer to as those golden handcuffs, and surrendered it all and said, okay, I'm doing it. I'm going to private practice. And I've been fully in private practice for 5 years. What else do you want to know? Do you want to know what I do in that private practice?
What do you do? And real quick, I want to apologize. I didn't see all the chats. Usually it pops up, and I didn't know anybody was talking in there. So I'll get to all the stuff that you guys wrote in there as soon as we wrap up or we move forward in this just a little bit. Yeah. So what do you do?
So I work in individual therapy. I do individual therapy, counseling, psychotherapy, and small groups. The traditional talk therapy that most people will think about when they're going to counseling or psychotherapy. Actually do yoga, somatic therapy or yoga therapy. I'm flitting with my words because there's all these TMs now. Like somatic experiencing is a TM, and you have to take that program. But I integrate mind and body and yogic principles and practices into my individual therapy as a way of supporting people to regulate their nervous system, come back online, be aware, be open, aware, and engaged in their life alongside the pain. So I do that through integrating breathwork and asana practice and meditative practices, as well as getting out of the office and going into the forest and getting into nature. And using that as the main form of intervention of supporting people to connect with themselves, to regulate enough that they can connect with themselves and remember what their values are and how we translate those values into action. So I have a social work student that just started with me last week, a bachelor BSW student, thinking about what we have to do with the students and students learning and connecting theory to practice and theory to practice. And I said, what we do here and what I do in private practice is help people connect to their values on a theoretical level. I value nature. I value my family, of course, to practice, to action. How do I live in alignment with the value of nature? Well, I get out there, I cultivate it, I try to tend to it, I try to, help it grow and learn from it while it helps me grow. So that's what I do in my private practice. And it's a hard question to answer, really, because it continues to grow and shift and change with each individual person that I'm working with and how I keep growing and changing over the years. Now,
well, so let's just imagine that you have somebody that you're doing some kind of practice with, the mindfulness practice.
Okay.
Now, do you do something like that every session? Do you devote a whole session sometimes? How does that look? Or is it different for everyone?
I try, and the reason why I say try is because I'm a human being, and sometimes, like today, we don't even introduce what we're doing and you get into conversation. But I try that we start every session with a centering, either a guided practice, like a specific meditation that I would take through, or a guided imagery practice, or just a more loosely facilitated centering on breath and body to connect with what's showing up. And so starting with it is pretty good. Ending with it sometimes doesn't always happen, but we also try to end with it. And then in the middle can be the talk therapy, where we do different kinds of, psychotherapeutic interventions. And yes, definitely. So I've worked with for a number of years, has really lots of anxiety related to health conditions and life. And the first probably year that we worked together was regulating and finding rest and connecting. So there was minimal talking. And I used yoga nidra in combination to acceptance and commitment therapy and some other yoga philosophies to bring them into a state where we integrated, and after learning about their values, we integrate it into it, of why you're here and what you want that life to look like. So both, always the start and the end as much as I can. And sometimes there's sessions that are just practice and integration to remind people how to really rest and to come into a state where they are really rested. Because even though we sleep at night, that doesn't mean that we've actually rested and allowed stress cycles to complete in our body. Sometimes it's not a slow, and we need to build the energy and get bigger. So getting up there, and we're doing hara breaths, and we're doing kapalabhati to the fire, to move out of it. So it depends on if someone is coming that's saying, I'm really struggling and I'm feeling low, and maybe depression is there, or anxiety is there, or if it's post-traumatic stress disorder, depending on what's coming up, will depend on what kind of intervention and how I work with them and integrate these practices. But they're integrated in all of them on some level, even if it's just notice your breath. Because it depends on where the readiness is for the other person, right?
Yeah. I imagine, that's got to be a huge factor in it, right? Because you work with everybody's body is different, life experience, where they're at in that moment.
But because it's private practice, they're coming on us knowing this is what I'm doing. So there's already a bit of an intention. And even if they come say, well, I don't want to do any yoga, I'm like, okay, well, you don't have to do yoga, because there's the vision is they're going to be doing one-legged downward facing dog, right? Or something. So it's also expanding that to go, well, what is your yoga? What is that place that you go to that you can find that state of bliss, of equity, of flow?
Yeah, I can't wait until we do the next episode with the other podcast, Revolutionary Social Work Podcast, because you and Alicia are so much further along and and thinking about yoga and mindfulness practices, that I really think that you guys are gonna have but that you two specifically will have a really deep, profound discussion, dialogue on it. And I just want to be there. I'm just excited that I get to be there as a listener and a participant. So
Looking
I look forward to
it.
that. I have one question, and then I'm going to go through this chat. I have one more question. So when you're as a social worker, you're working with folks, obviously you're helping folks, or you're helping them help themselves, however we want to put it. Does it help you to practice therapy with other people? Do you grow as well as a result of participating in that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I acknowledge that. So one of the things that I do, and I think, and I do strongly believe this is also yoga, is at the end of each session, we share appreciations. What did you appreciate? And it's not a self thing, like, what did you think that I did so great that helped you? It's no. What did you just appreciate about this time? And sometimes it's like the furniture, the space, the view, or the listening, or the practice. So to hear that gives me that feedback. And then I share my appreciations, because I always learn something. That's how I continue to live and grow. That is my evidence. And anyone that works with me, and a lot of people that don't work with me, but just know me in my personal life, can we just try to view this as an experiment? Like, it's okay. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but let's have a look, because we're so set in that A plus B has to equal C. So if we can look at it as an experiment to say, well, maybe it means something new that we didn't know. Try to live that way.
I like it. And that's just, letting all you future social workers know about the blessings that come with it as well. I've been in social work for, I don't know, like 15 years or something now, maybe a little longer. And I would say that I've had a lot of good teachers, but the very best teachers I've ever had were when I first started, before I ever had any social work education, and I worked at a treatment facility with troubled youth. Those kids were the best teachers I ever had, because they taught me about myself. They taught me about the world. And I mean, these are kids that people toss to the side, and they had so much to give. And I wish we would recognize that more and, capitalize on it. Well, all right, let's get to these questions. I neglected them for too long. And again, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Normally they pop up, and I like to do them as we're talking about them. So my bad, and I'll get on that later, but there were no notifications for me, so I just didn't think they were.
I saw 2 notifications when we just started, and then they stopped, and I looked at it too, and now all of a sudden here they are.
Yeah, I saw the first ones from Carla, and then I didn't even see Carla reply to me. So anyways, let's get to it. Kimberly, she doesn't have a question, but she did say, going back to your experiment, that was such a sincere and interesting growth experiment. That was real and descriptive. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks,
try
Kimberly.
something real quick. Let's see if this pops up it does. This one says, this is from Charlie. I appreciate Zenia following the statement of, quote, I have to keep going because what else is there? Because I want to be here, I want to live in this world. It's easy for me to get stuck in the thought of I have to keep going because what else is there? And not thinking about if and why I want to be here. And if you want to comment on any of these that aren't questions, just stop me.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Charlie. We got Kirsten. I almost did it again. I almost called you Kristen. We have Kirsten. She says, I have a lot of those moments when I recognize or congratulate myself back to online, but I have yet to know the right thing to do after that. What are you supposed to do once you go back online? Good question.
Sometimes laugh. Ooh. Okay, I'm online. Like, I give my head a shake and I go, okay, I'm here. Like, and then I go back to, why am I here? What am I doing? Right? So sometimes that happens when I will be in a session. And as you said, Christian, what if someone says something or something shows up for me, and that, how do I presence myself? I do laugh. Oh, you know what? Sorry. I had a momentary blip. I use humor a lot, and that helps me kind of regulate to that, to come back. It does regulate my body. And then I go, why am I here? Okay, I have to do this. And then I pick, how can I simply do it? So if I'm in a client session, it's easy because the potion's live and in front of me, and it's easier to get back into it. But if I'm doing something that's not more emotionally taxing, because that doesn't sound right, but for me, like the business, like running a business is far more emotionally taxing because it's not my genius. And that's often where those words kind of come in, and then they get clouded and they travel over to who I am as a therapist or a mom, or then all the guilt and shame in the world can come in there. But I congratulate myself. I usually laugh, and then I pick one small thing. And sometimes that small thing is still not the action I need to do to continue what I'm doing in terms of the task and checking off the task, but I'm going to stand up. I will stand up and say, or move my body. Because as I move my body, I'm also changing my perspective. I'm moving to the somatics, and then that continues. If I can do that and I can remind myself, I have a choice that I can lift up my arm, or I can stretch my body, or I can turn my head, or I can stand up, reminds me that I continue to have choice. And then I just go choice by choice. And it's small, little steps. Because I like to jump over things. And that's usually when I get hurt. So coming back in just that little step. I hope that helps, Kirsten. Kirsten, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for the question, Kirsten. I would just add too that I think you can also look at it as something that you build upon. So like the first time that you teach yourself to come back online, that, you know, you have something that you're able to do, or just for a little moment to push yourself forward. And then the next time you remember that and you build on it a little bit more. And then, you know, over time, you say a year, a couple of years passes, you have some real tools and strategies, and you've built upon that, and you practice it, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Did you see Gloria's follow up?
Yeah. Hey, Zenia, how did you start congratulating yourself for noticing?
Because I congratulated a client for noticing. That's the gift that I got from them. I was describing it to a client. They noticed it, and I said, hey, you just noticed that you got distracted. How awesome is that? High five. And then I went, oh, maybe we should start doing that. That's how I started.
What do you think about, just a follow-up question, what do you think when, like, somebody like myself, who I've learned to manage it a little bit, but I have basically self-diagnosed ADD, right? My mind, especially earlier in the morning, and if I have to pay attention for a long extended time, look back to you can see why I wasn't a good student as a kid, because you're talking and I'm all over the place. And even with this podcast, I struggled at first, you know, because sometimes they're like 2+ hours, and I have other things I have going on, and I just can't focus. And so how do you help somebody that has a little, maybe they're predisposed to struggle a little bit more in that sense?
I'm similar. So I say that. I don't know. Do I have a formula? Do I have I diagnose these a lot. I mean, yes, they serve a purpose, but sometimes, you know, I have ADHD or I have ADD. It gives us a bit of an out and then it's seen as something that's negative too, where I'm doing right now is because I do have that. And I wasn't the greatest student because I moved around too much. And you know, I said at the beginning, and Zenia was always the storyteller. That was stuff that came out of my family's mouths. What came out of my teacher's mouths was, Zenia talks too much. And I realized that the talking that I was having is actually questions, because I'm noticing a lot of things. So now I go, when I catch myself being really busy and caught and distracted, it's often because it's not the shiny object, like, ooh, look at this little shiny object, look at it. It's not shiny, it's brilliant. And I want to know more of it. And that's why I get caught into it. Because I don't get, what is it about it? And then I want to investigate it. So now I start to tell myself that I'm just inquisitive and curious. And I have to come back to this point, because now where am I? What am I doing? And where's my mind? And am I following what I said I was going to be doing, which allows me to be authentic and ethical as best as I can. But I do get distracted all the time, and I wiggle all the time.
I think you bring up a good point about diagnoses, you know, where we've come to this point where we're so quick to use a diagnosis. And so why don't I just say I have problems with attention, you know, or I use the diagnoses instead of just talking about it organically. So I'm going to work on that. Instead of diagnosing myself with ADD, I'm going to actually describe how I feel.
Mhm.
All right, so we've got Eli, and they say, definitely, as somebody who went through similar struggles growing up, and being present and in touch with yourself becomes something you have to be intentional about, sometimes or all the time. Thanks, Eli. We got Sophie. A lot of people are now realizing that trauma and stress are stored in the body, and yoga dance is a really good way to release it. That's a good point. The dance part. I have who I just published with the Revolutionary Social Work podcast, MT. My brother, he's in Texas, but we met in Hawaii, and that's how I met him. I'd go to the beach, and there's this little area over there on the concrete, and he'd be over there doing like African dances with all multicultural group, and they just looked like they were releasing it, if that makes sense, and so that made me want to go and talk to him and get to know him, and that's how I became friends with MT. But dance is great. What do you have anything to add, Zenia?
Yeah, no, I love it. That's how my kids know that I'm safe again, that I'm back online. So if I'm getting into, overwhelmed mom and I've lost it and I'm swirling in that state, and I've noticed it. One story, who it was that asked earlier, what do you do when you come back online? It's the movement piece, but the dance, I throw on music and I have that dance party in the kitchen, and my kids, even if I just yelled at them or whatever, had a poor parenting moment, they know that that's when I'm back safe, and we come back and they swarm. And it's really cool because it is dance, and then they dance, and then we're laughing, and then we're okay to carry on with the homework or the putting the shoes away or whatever it is. Yeah, movement. I think it's intentional movement, and that's really what yoga is. It's intentional movement with purpose of releasing or connecting.
Yeah, there's a book. I have it right here, but it's something about the 7 circles of indigenous healing. I can't remember what the exact title of it, but the 7 circles. And one of the circles is movement. And I use that book as a supplementary text for my substance abuse course, because oftentimes we look at substance abuse in really strange ways, and from my opinion, and why we don't focus more on other things like what they tried to do with me back in the day, and movement and things like that. So just my thoughts. And this might be a first for you right here. You got a happy birthday wishes all the way from Saipan in the
Wow.
Mariana Islands.
Thanks, Carla.
All
That's
right,
amazing.
Let's see who we got here. Oh, Carla still. Carla says, as a social worker, people often expect us to solve their problems. We are also human and face our own struggles. You mentioned, here's my pain, here's my struggle. How can you help me? What advice would you give to social workers who are learning to handle their own struggles while helping clients with theirs?
Mm-hmm.
We talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, we did talk about it a little bit, but find that thing or that person or that piece that can be sacred to you, and have that practice, and make it as much as a non-negotiable as you can. If I'm going to say it in one sentence, I guess that's the sentence that came out.
All right. Jenna says, thank you for covering these points. I have to question, how do you handle high stress situations involving your clients?
I feel like I need a little bit of some more context in that. I'll use an example of when I worked in a hospital than working in private practice, because I think that the high stress feeling with a client in private practice where I see people doesn't happen as much. I mean, it does when they're speaking about something that's very deeply impactful. A lot of emotions, and high emotions or strong emotions. Trauma-informed lens, it's a delicate balance of letting them to have their experience without it snowballing to it being to a place where it's unsafe and we can't re-regulate, and we don't want to stuff it down and shame it and say don't have it here, because that's often what has already been happening. A practice that I do is a way of modeling that, is without telling them as they do it. I sit back, I open. When I feel the tension in my body, I open. And I soften and I lean back a little bit more, and I slow my breath down. And I acknowledge that it feels like this is really difficult right now. I feel it, you feel it. How can we just pause? We still get through it, but how can we pause for a second to make ourselves a little bit more, just a little bit more settled or soft? that we can regulate into that place so we can continue. And that's that walking alongside the pain. And always choice. If it feels too much, find your edge. I learned this in yoga. Find your edge and come back 5 or 10%. Move that, then go again and find your edge. It's probably going to be at a different spot. But if we just keep forcing it, then we will resist. So we just force a little touch, come back, and then where there's an expansion, and then we go farther. So I do it with me, and I invite that. And if it feels too much and it got too big, then we work on regulating and coming back to a place and softening, going, okay, hey, let's shift that so we're in a different place next time, so it doesn't get so big that we're now actually becoming re-traumatized or more stressed for it. That's not why we're here. Hope that helps.
I would just add one thing I think that you can do too is you can kind of use your imagination for things that might be stressful for you in a situation like that, and imagine how you might react and whatnot. So it's not the first time you thought about it is in the situation. And there's always going to be things that you've never thought about as well. But
yeah.
And then kind of coming to terms as a social worker, you're going to be with somebody that makes you, I shouldn't say makes you feel uncomfortable, but you feel uncomfortable in their presence. And you got to figure it out and get to know yourself better. Let's see. Sophie just agrees that you can do yoga anywhere. Done it in a studio, done it in my dorm room with a beach towel or a mat. You absolutely can. We got Star says, hearing you talk about breathwork and yoga makes me think of energy. I believe our individual energy affects everyone we come in contact with. I do too, Star, and I'm something that I'm learning about myself. And I've often had situations where I'm like, why aren't I attracting what I'm trying to? And then I realize, well, how's my energy? Check yourself, and what kind of energy am I bringing to the room? And sometimes it could be as simple as, you're feeling super anxious and insecure about things, and that can deter people unintentionally. You know what I mean? Even though that might be what you need.
I love that. Check yourself. Great quote. Christian, I'm going to ask you to name this quote. We got to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves.
Where is that from? Obviously, I've heard it. Is it from a specific thing?
It's either from Ice-T or Ice Cube or NWA.
Oh, yeah, it is. I think that's Ice Cube.
Cube. I was actually doing a workshop on discernment and boundaries and communication, and it was called Permission to Pause. And then I renamed it in the middle of it to Check Yourself Before You Wreck Yourself as a reminder to come in and be there and center first, to do our own work first.
Yeah. It's definitely from the poetry of Ice Cube. So some chickadee cheek says, so come on and chickadee check yourself before you wreck yourself. Chickadee check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Yeah, nice.
Little Ice Cube reference. And that's old Ice Cube. That's like, it's even before my time. I'm old. All right, we got Kristen. Okay, there we go. Kirsten, I love that you had a good experience with goat yoga. I've always wanted to do it. I tried yoga for the first time when I moved to Alaska last year, and I'm so happy to be able to relate to what you're talking about. Awesome, Kirsten. I think yoga is one of those things too in social work and whatnot sometimes, is that it's like esoteric. And so people aren't comfortable, engaging in dialogue about it or talking about it. Carla again says, honestly, I've never done yoga before, but now I'm really curious about it. I understand it's a great form of exercise, but after hearing you talk about it, I realized it's not just about physical fitness or losing weight. It sounds that yoga offers so much more and a deeper, more spiritual connection, helping with mindfulness and inner peace. I'd really love to learn more and experience those benefits for myself. And maybe Zenia has some tips for where you can go to look to start. I have one I'll give you. It's called Inner Dimension TV. And I like it just because they have every length, every style. I've learned a lot from them, but they have everything from a 10-minute stretch to get you going in the morning to like 90-minute power yoga. So again, that's called I think it's interdimension.tv. Check that out. Me and my wife just have I think it's like a $20 membership or something, and we can use it whenever we want.
That's awesome. Yeah, I use hold here and there. I always just say, like, if you're gonna, anytime you try yoga, I say give it 2 tries. 2 tries. Because the first time it's like, what's going on here? What am I doing? And we're not really in it. We're so focused on trying to get into the mechanics. And then try it again, whether it's in a studio or it's a virtual class, YouTube. And you can listen, you can watch for a few minutes to see if you like it first and read about it. Adrienne is someone that's on YouTube that, I was introduced to her by people talking about it, and she's got great classes, membership ones. I think right now I'm subscribed to like a Peloton Lululemon one or whatever, because it's easy. For me, it's an app and it's easy if I want to be led. I'm not the best at being a rule follower, and I tend to lead myself, but I would just say try it. And if you go to a studio and you go to a class and you don't super love it, try another one, because not every teacher is the same. You're not going to connect with every style of yoga too. So try a couple out and use it as an experiment to see, because some will be more fitness for sure. For sure. Some will be more fitness. Others won't.
Just to add to that, though, is that it is some great fitness, and it transformed my body. Like, put it this way, I always would go to the doctor as a 20-year-old or so, right? And they'd do the BMI, and they'd say, "You're obese." And I'd look at myself and I'd say, I know I got a little extra weight, but how do you say that I'm obese? And I think that I'm broad, so I'm a little bit easier to fall into those things. But when I stopped drinking sugar, I didn't stop completely, but for the most part, I stopped, and I did yoga. My body went to that weight that I was supposed to be at, and it stayed there ever since. If that makes sense, it's just funny how it works. So it's really good for fitness. It took off a lot of excess pounds that I had, but it also made me much more flexible, which increases things like your ability to sleep. I've always had problems with sleep. My back would be stiff and stuff, and I'd have to lie flat on my back. And now I can curl up in a ball and go to sleep. Mm-hmm. It's a whole different experience. Okay, let's get through these. Liana says, I've wanted to try goat yoga for 5 years now. It's probably been 10 more years since I last did yoga even. This is definitely encouraging to get me back into yoga, even if it's just at home for now. Yes.
Well, Leanne, I don't know what your home life is like, and if you have other beings in there, but you can experience the similar things of goat yoga, especially if you have young kids. Because as I was at goat yoga and I was in a tabletop position, my 10-year-old decided that he was also going to be a goat and hopped on my back and did a tabletop on top of me. So just get on the ground and start moving.
Even just rolling around, right? Stretches you out.
Bed yoga is my favorite. Like, think about it tomorrow morning when you wake up and you open up your eyes, or even before you open your eyes. Let Christian know, let me know somehow. I bet you're going to move yourself through different yoga postures. You're going to wake up. You're going to do a bit of a lateral stretch, like a reclined supine half Ardha Chandasana half moon. You'll do a reclined twist. You're doing it anyways. You're naturally doing it. Yeah, that too.
Just kidding. Before you reach for your iPhone, do what Zenia talked about. Or better yet, put your iPhone in the closet during the night. All right, Robin. I think she's hitting us up all the way from Ohio. Does the Canadian healthcare system cover your services, or do people have to pay out of pocket? If they do have to pay out of pocket, does that make it difficult to provide equitable services? And that's a good question, because I was talking to my friend in Wales over in England, and he said that it's completely different. It's all run by the state, so it's not private in any way, shape, or form. Everything social work is run through the state.
Yeah, so in private practice, you're in private practice, and it is not paid by the healthcare system. If you're seeing somebody at like a hospital and you're seeing social work or therapy out of hospitals, those tend to be covered by, in Ontario, we call it OHIP, Ontario Health Insurance Plan, or something like that. I actually don't know if that's the case. I always just knew it as OHIP, so I don't know. That's what it would be. Now, depending on what kind of job they have, if you have a full-time job, depending on what type of full-time job, where it is, you would have extended health benefits that are part of your salary. And then they would have a dollar amount for social work services or paramedical services or psychological services. And they would get paid back in reimbursement. Make it difficult to provide equitable services? Yes. And that is something that I constantly struggle with, because then it gets into business. And I have to have people pay for my service because I have to pay for the rent of the unit that we're in, and my insurance and my expertise. But like, yes, who I am and what I have to offer, the skills that I know. We can offer sliding scales. Then it goes into who's the deserving, and there's lots of different pieces of it. It's a challenge. So we do groups. We offer different ways of doing it. So I offer groups, so then people can come in to do groups, and it's less per payment. Then offer, I expanded my practice to include yoga, where it's not me doing therapy, but it's other participants. Usually, actually, it's been people that have come and done services with me, or that I've been aligned with just for shared values, and I know who they are as a teacher, and they teach yoga as nervous system regulation, which is also cheaper cost-wise if they're paying out of pocket and doing it that way. So I'm still trying to figure out how to do that, and how, because I can't offer everything for free, because I also have to eat too. All of that works, but it does make it difficult in some way. Like I said, where I particularly am located, people have money to pay, or they have insurance to pay. Had younger individuals, students, people that are living their own, that are going to school, they have a job, but it's still not enough. We talk about that in different ways of how we can do it. And sometimes there's pro bono, or we bring in students that can teach it, take it, or say do a couple sessions and really get into that kind of, here's the base to help you help yourself, so you can learn it and experiment it. So we adjust that way. It's a tricky one. Coming from school of social work too, of learning that, private agencies were bad, and you're not doing good social work if you're going to a private agency, because you're going to profit off of it. It's an interesting conversation, which we might have to have more of later with getting through it, but it's a challenge.
Well, and I think Star's next question fits into it as well. And before I share the question, I just want to pose, almost every social worker has been in the situation where it's like, you have to ask the nagging question, how are we going to bill for it? And I know even my wife, Alicia, struggles with that as she's tried to integrate yoga and mindfulness practices into her therapy through Southeast Regional Health Corporation. And it becomes with insurance, at least in the United States, insurance controlling so many things, right? It's about it becomes not about like whether it's an effective practice all the time, but can we bill them for it? You have not everybody, but lots of these agencies have huge admin teams, that are going to be breathing down their neck for those things. And so it goes right in with Star's question. She says, with body work, what are some of the ways you document for the bean counters in the insurance world that wants very quantifiable results?
So the way that it works for insurance with us, unless there's standard insurance that people have as part of their healthcare packages, that you don't actually have to, we have to give them a receipt that says that they attended the service, what was the service, and it would say social work service is really what they're asking, or counseling and psychotherapy, or consultation. There's different kind of language in that. We don't tend to have to show our documentation unless we're doing treatment and we're working for like insurance company, like when someone got into a car accident. So then like the car insurances are doing that. Then they want to have more of the documents that say, what did you do? Question, was it Robin that asked it? The name was
Star.
Star, sorry, yeah.
Star.
Because documenting body work has just also been difficult, because it is a new practice, right? So when we would document in social work, what did you do? Or motivated the client, used such and such intervention informed by this, or did this and this and this. So with body work, I have always struggled with that, to say what that is. And now I simply say, it depends on what I'm writing, but, used body-oriented practices to identify and locate emotion as sensation in the body. Incorporated breath work to support nervous system regulation. Client appeared to benefit from the practice and shared the following feedback. which it tends to be, that was fucking awesome. Sorry. What it is of, whoa, I really needed that. Or was tearful afterwards because they haven't actually had a minute of quiet and silence in a long time. And the tears often come from that acknowledgement of, oh, wow, I've neglected myself, or this is something I didn't know it could be this simple. So keep it simple in your documentation. Did this. Nervous, what are you doing? What is the goal of your intervention? Nervous system regulation, emotional regulation, connection with self, building awareness.
And you might need to be creative. Find creative, I don't want to say like walkarounds, but there's oftentimes there's always a way to make things work somehow.
Right, because the social work record is, there's stuff that they have to know, and then there's things that are maybe not relevant, that are clinically relevant to you as the social worker and the work that you're doing with the client, and maybe not actually clinically relevant to the insurance company, because we don't come in and go, I'm only dealing with the fact that I got into a car accident, now I'm afraid to drive. It's our whole lives. And that might be that, the cliche, the straw that broke the camel's back, where all of the stuff comes out.
All right, we got one more comment from Eli, and they say, I think in some cases, diagnoses are helpful only if you're willing to put in the work for self-regulation. However, with ADHD or clinical depression or other diagnoses that have literal chemical components, it's even more crucial because all the tips, skills, and knowledge of DBT, maybe that means CBT, training won't account for that neurological imbalance. And that's a good point, Eli. And even with my own, like I say, self-diagnosed, I don't self-diagnose ADHD, but ADD. But Dr. Gabor Mate has a great book. It's called Scattered Minds on ADHD. And he talks a lot about how he was against medication at first for these kind of things. And, you hear about people, being prescribed amphetamines. And I think an important fact is that the United States prescribes amphetamine for ADHD more than the rest of the world combined. So I think there's an issue there. But Dr. Gabor Mate I haven't ever taken any medication for my own, but he talks about working with people that really just couldn't, like you're saying, a chemical imbalance, and they needed something else, and it really, 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 really worked for them.
Yeah.
And so I'm very open-minded, although I'm kind of like, try other things before medication. You're absolutely right. There can be chemical imbalances that we can, that with the right doctor, the right psychiatrist or whatever, can get us where we need to be. Sometimes what I disagree with is using it oftentimes as the first resort. You go talk to, I went and talked to somebody once in Hawaii, and I won't even get into it too much, but they tried to force me to go down a route I didn't want to go, and it didn't work either. And I wish they would have taken a little bit more time to listen to me and provided me some other tools rather than just slamming me on the medication first. Because like I said, those things have worked. Yoga, mindfulness, exercise, many other things. They haven't cured it, but they have worked in significant ways.
Yeah. And I think just to clarify too, diagnoses, because I struggle with, I think there's a lot of overrepresentation. Is that the right way to say it? Right? Like that people are given these diagnoses, and I don't know if they're true diagnoses. And I've also seen people be so attached to a diagnosis that, like you said, they can't necessarily, they're not willing to pull in the work for themselves. Absolutely. There's everybody is different. I don't respond well to medications. Like I never really have. I get allergic reactions. I don't respond well. I have had medication for ADHD, and it was super helpful. And then it really wasn't. And it wasn't good. And it was almost depending on because we can get into another conversation, but I use other things now too, and watching other ways of doing it, but that's me. That's just me. And I know lots of people that do need to have medications and more of that kind of chemical component to support, because I've always seen it as a pie with lots of different slices, and they're all different sizes. What maybe supported me as Christian, how we started this conversation, I'm not the same person that I was a year ago. My body's actually not going to metabolize food and medications the same way as it did 6 years ago. I didn't happen to me. It happened to a bunch of my friends that couldn't eat certain foods after they had babies because their whole taste changed in their bodies. So I like it to go to check in and say, if it's working, awesome, great. If it's not, though, it is a bit of a trial and error to find your own right kind of mix that works for you.
And I just want to thank you for the comment, Eli, because
Yeah.
it's important for us to challenge the way that we're looking at things. And sometimes we talk about things, we don't cover it all, or we miss something. And so that's an important element of that. So thank you for that. We did get another one last comment that came up from Liana. It says, my biggest regret as a parent of a special needs kid was slapping him on stimulant medication for ADHD at a young age. I believe he was almost 5. It blows my mind how fast doctors are willing to prescribe these children medications such as Adderall or Ritalin. And I just wanted to say that goes back to what I was saying, that the United States of America prescribes more children with stimulants for amphetamines for ADHD, ADD than the rest of the world combined. And the reason why that fact alone should be a little bit alarming. Whenever, like incarceration, when you outpace everyone else, that's to such a high degree, then to me that shows that you have some kind of a major problem. And we don't have time to get into it right now, but the other side to this is capitalism and making money off medications and how that they're promoted, and they, everywhere's different, but incentives for doctors to prescribe things and things like that. And I think that if we knew the truth behind all of that, it'd make us a little sick. Not saying, and I don't want to, just going back to Eli's comment, I don't want to say not to listen to your doctor or your psychiatrist or whatever.
Or to take a medication. If it's helping you, then take a medication if it's helping you, right? Like that's the piece, but it's that, I think what you're saying, Christian, and I agree with you on that, is to think about it and see what works for you, because it is also a lot of people that go, I just want the medication because then it'll be easier. I see that a lot with anxiety. Like, I wish can't I just have an anti-anxiety medication? And I had to work with a lot of kids that sometimes it can be an out. And unfortunately it has happened from, the hand of the doctor or whatever that said, oh, you've got anxiety, no problem. Here's your anti-anxiety. Don't worry. You don't have to do any presentations at school. You don't actually have to talk to anybody. It's totally fine. Here's a letter to do that. But then they're in therapy because they want to talk to people, and like, okay, so let's work on this. Oh no, my psychiatrist said I didn't have to do any. I have a note, so I don't have to stand up in class. So okay, right? And when they're little, like, as this other person had shared about their kid at 5, in the 80s. Oh God, last old century. The 80s and 90s, and there was a period of time in elementary school where they changed phys ed class from every single day to twice a week. Do you know what came out of that? Can you guess what came out of that, Christian? What do you think?
Unhealthy outcomes.
Yeah, a lot of kids that were all of a sudden prescribed Ritalin because they couldn't focus and sit down. What else happened? Oh, we stopped letting them have gym. We took it out and we forced them to sit there and not move. The world is moving. It moves, right? The universe is moving. We're always moving. So this juxtaposition, or this trying to find this equanimity between finding stillness and movement, is really tricky, because we will have to keep moving. And I think we're not healthy if we're stagnant. So we have to move and be allowed to move in a purposeful direction.
And I think, something when we talk about children, sometimes they are in, like you just talked about, situations that's not a natural environment for them, like sitting down for, so depending on what they're doing for school or whatever. But there's a guy named Mike Africa Jr., if you're familiar. He's part of the MOVE organization in Philly. And I read a anecdote from him one time, and he was talking about he was in the furniture store shopping for furniture with his wife and kids. And his kids, either one kid or multiple kids, I can't remember, were acting up. And he told them, you need to stop it. We're trying to get this done. You're being bad. And she said, no, you're being bad, Daddy. I'm not supposed to be sitting here. I'm a kid. I'm not supposed to be like this. And he thought about it. He said, you know what? You're right. And so he took her outside and played with her while the mom finished up. But sometimes we expect children to behave in situations that it's not really reasonable for them to behave, and they're not in an environment that's natural for 5, 6, 7, whatever, however old they are. but we have unreasonable expectations of them. And then if we're putting them on medication because they're in unnatural environments and they're in situations that it's unreasonable for them to act like a calm adult, we got to check ourselves as parents. And I like how Mike Africa Jr., that his response was to listen to his kid instead of being like, shut up, I told you to be quiet, or he thought that the couch or whatever he was buying was more important than his child's well-being. He showed that he is a good parent, that is reflective, that listens to his child, and is willing to change himself. And I think as social workers, as parents, that's the best we can be, right? As somebody that's willing to acknowledge when we made a mistake or when we're wrong. And instead of feeling bad about it or being upset, we look at it as, hey, this is an opportunity for growth and I can do better the next time. And I can learn from this.
There's always choice, and there's always an opportunity to choose a different way next time and see how that one goes. So choose your own adventure.
Absolutely. Well, Zenia, we talked and we were planning on to shoot for an hour or a little over, but we got it. We just did 2 of them. So we got 2 hours worth. And I just wanted to acknowledge again, those were some great comments and questions. And I didn't know that we could put them on the stream or anything like that. And so I'm sorry, one, that we didn't get to them in real time. But I think that's a really cool way that we can put them on the screen. And for future podcasts of the Critical Social Worker, please come back and don't hesitate to ask questions. I'll try to get them in a more real time next time. But so thank you to the audience, and a big thank you to Zenia for taking the time. We're all busy people. You are a human being, a parent, a professional. And I think what I always say is that one way that you can show that you had a good conversation or good dialogue is how you experience the time. And 2 hours is a long time no matter what, but I definitely don't feel like I'm sitting here for a super extended amount of time. And it feels like out of all the things we talked about, we could talk about all of those for we could go much deeper in all those areas. So fortunately, we're going to be Alicia and I will be talking to you on the Revolutionary Social Work podcast sometime soon. But I just want to say a big thank you from my heart to yours, my family to yours, for taking the time, for sharing with me. I know I learned a lot with my students and with the larger world of social workers and beyond out there. This is how we change the world, just one little bit at a time. So I just want to say, again, big thank you from me, from my heart to yours.
Received. Thank you so much. And thanks for having me and bringing me back. I was pretty tired before we got on, and I think another measure of the quality of conversation is I am ready to go, like, take on the world now. So thank you so much. To everyone that chimed in with your kind words, your amazing questions. Thanks so much for having me, and I am a better person for have been sharing this last 2 hours with all of you. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, I'll try to get this up. I'm going to shoot for Mondays for these, but I can't guarantee. But I'm going to try to produce I've released the Revolutionary Social Work on Thursdays, these ones on Mondays. It all just depends on if I have the bandwidth. My students are probably like, you got to release the module. You haven't graded last week's module. You got to get on the voice threads and comment on them. So I just have a lot to do, but I'll do my best to get it up as soon as I can.
Can I give you one piece of thing that I missed that you've shifted out of? From
sure.
When your podcasts have grown, and that I've actually taken with me into a lot of the things that I do is checking in with the weather, because I see that it looks like it's raining for you behind you.
Yeah, I used to do that. I used to always start off with the natural environment. I forgot.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're in Girdwood, Alaska. We're down south, I guess you just call it the South Alaska. We're right by the Kenai Peninsula, between the Kenai Peninsula and Anchorage. So the ocean, or a channel of the ocean, is only like about 3 miles down the way, and then you can't see it, but right behind me is the ski resort. So we're in a unique, I'm from Utah, so the ski resorts are already way up in the mountains, whereas here we're right at just above sea level, and the mountain's right here. And the only thing it's a great place because we can get out and walk with the family. When I looked up the best trails in Alaska, one of the top 10 was right outside my back door. So it's a blessing. I can walk the kids to school. The downside of it is it's the most northern rainforest either in the world or in the United States, I'm not sure. And so that's what we get is a lot of rain. And I don't mind the rain except for when it's cold and it's hard to get outside when it prevents me from getting outside and moving with my family. That's where I'm at. You're probably not that much different of a climate. You're probably a little bit further south than we are. Maybe not though.
I think. Well, I'm just outside of Toronto, so it's kind of the south part of Ontario. At 20, well, sorry, so Celsius Canadian, 27 degrees today, which is warm seasonally for what it typically is. It's much warmer than it typically is, but we've been seeing that with climate change. But the reason why I asked about the weather is because another thing that helps me check myself and ground is to recognize what's happening in the weather, because I'm going to respond differently. And most people do. It's beautiful and sunny and they're going to be really happy today. And when it's raining, some people, not all, but a lot, it's right. So I missed that piece of it, and I'm glad that you still shared it in. And it's something that I have learned from you, that I've taken in since our last sessions, that we talk about it in almost all my stuff.
Yeah.
So thank you.
And that I appreciate you for bringing it up, because sometimes we forget some of the things that did work, as you know, we have some time away. But just real quick, I was looking at it on the map. You're way further south than we are. I don't know exactly, but you know, like all the way, like we're completely on the other side of British Columbia, north of British Columbia, compared to you. Yeah. So we're a long, long ways away. But as my old former mentor, Yupik elder grandmother Rita would say, I always thought that an elder like that wouldn't like technology, but she would talk about it as, this is how I'm going to stay in touch with all you all when I'm no longer here, which is exactly what she does. So, all right, it's 2:03. I got to go. I got work to do. Thanks again, Zenia, and I'll be in touch.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Peace. The Critical Social Worker is a joint endeavor between the University of Alaska Fairbanks Department of Social Work and a Conscious Party Productions. Today's episode featured Zenia, and it was hosted by Christian Ace Stettler. Brought to you by the University of Alaska Fairbanks Department of Social Work, this has been a Conscious Party production. You've been listening to The Critical Social Worker, a revolutionary storytelling podcast. Your story, my story, our story. All right, everyone. Until next time, peace.